On the morning of February 28, 2026, nearly 900 missiles and bombs slammed into Iran in just 12 hours. The supreme leader was dead. Airports across the Middle East went dark. Oil tankers in the Strait of Hormuz scrambled to reverse course, and over 2,000 people were killed in the first week alone. This wasn't a surprise to anyone paying attention. This war had been building for decades. A slow-motion collision between three countries that kept escalating, kept crossing red lines, and kept convincing themselves the other side would back down. They were all wrong. This is the story of how we got here. To understand the Iran war, you have to go back to 1953. That's the year the CIA and British intelligence overthrew Iran's democratically elected Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh. He'd made the mistake of nationalizing Iran's oil industry, which threatened British profits. So the West replaced him with the Shah, a monarch who was friendly to Western interests, but deeply unpopular with his own people. For 26 years, the Shah ruled Iran with an iron fist, backed by American money and American weapons. Iranians never forgot who put him there, and in 1979 they made that very clear. The Islamic Revolution swept the Shah from power and replaced him with Ayatollah Khomeini, a religious hardliner who called America the Great Satan. The revolutionaries stormed the American embassy in Tehran and held 52 Americans hostage for 444 days. It was a humiliation that scarred both nations permanently. From that moment on, the United States and Iran were locked in a cycle of hostility that would never really break. For decades after the revolution, the rivalry simmered. But in 2002, everything changed. Iranian dissidents revealed that Iran had been secretly building nuclear facilities, hidden from international inspectors. Suddenly, this wasn't just about ideology. It was about a hostile regime potentially getting the bomb. Israel was terrified. An Iranian nuclear weapon would be existential, and Iran's leaders had repeatedly called for Israel's destruction. The Americans weren't thrilled either. A nuclear-armed Iran could destabilize the entire Middle East and trigger a nuclear arms race among its neighbors. After years of sanctions and negotiations, the world reached a landmark agreement in 2015, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, better known as the Iran Nuclear Deal. Iran agreed to limit its nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Diplomacy had actually worked. And then, in 2018, Donald Trump pulled the United States out of the deal. He called it the worst deal ever negotiated and reimposed crushing sanctions on Iran. The Iranians felt betrayed. They'd upheld their end of the bargain, and now they were being punished anyway. So they started enriching uranium again, faster and to higher levels than ever before. The diplomatic guardrails were gone. On October 7, 2023, Hamas launched the deadliest attack on Israel in its history. Over 1,000 Israelis were killed in a single day. The attack was devastating, but its consequences would ripple far beyond Gaza. Israel's response was ferocious, but it didn't stop at Hamas. Israel saw October 7th as proof that its entire security architecture needed to change. The so-called Axis of Resistance, Iran's network of proxy groups stretching from Gaza to Lebanon to Yemen to Iraq, all of them had to be dismantled. And Israel had the political will to do it. In the months that followed, Israel systematically went after Iran's allies, one by one. Hezbollah, the most powerful of Iran's proxies, was first. In September 2024, Israel pulled off something extraordinary. In a series of rapid strikes, they decapitated Hezbollah's entire leadership, including Hassan Nasrallah, the man who had led the organization for over 30 years. Nasrallah's death sent shockwaves through the region. Iran couldn't just watch its allies get destroyed. In April 2024, after Israel struck the Iranian embassy compound in Damascus, Iran launched its most brazen attack ever. Over 300 drones and missiles fired directly at Israel. It was the first time Iran had ever struck Israel from its own soil. Most were intercepted, but the message was unmistakable. The shadow war was becoming a real one. Israel struck back in October, hitting military targets inside Iran and exposing something crucial. Iran's air defenses were weak, far weaker than anyone had expected. That vulnerability would prove catastrophic in the months to come. And then came the final domino. With Hezbollah crippled and unable to prop up its ally, Syria's President Bashar al-Assad fell in December 2024. Rebel forces led by Ahmed al-Sharaa toppled the regime that had been Iran's closest Arab ally for decades. In the space of a few months, Iran's entire regional network had been shattered. The axis of resistance was in ruins. By June 2025, the situation was a powder keg, and on June 13th, Israel lit the fuse. Operation Rising Lion was a massive aerial assault on Iran, the first open war between the two countries in history. Israel quickly overwhelmed Iran's air defenses and caused devastating damage to military and nuclear infrastructure. Iran fired back with an estimated 550 ballistic missiles, an unprecedented barrage. But it wasn't enough. Israel's missile defense systems, backed by American technology, held firm. Then the United States made a move that changed everything. American B-2 bombers dropped GBU-57 bunker-buster bombs on Iran's underground nuclear facilities at Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. These were the deepest, most protected sites in Iran's nuclear program. Trump called it a limited one-off mission, but the damage was severe. A leaked intelligence report suggested Iran had secretly moved much of its enriched uranium before the strikes hit. But the CIA countered that the physical destruction would set Iran back years. On June 23rd, Trump announced a ceasefire and proudly dubbed it the 12-Day War. It was over, or so everyone thought. The aftermath of the 12-Day War was devastating for Iran. Its currency went into freefall. New international sanctions imposed in September made things even worse. Ordinary Iranians who had nothing to do with the nuclear program were the ones who suffered most. On December 28, 2025, the people of Iran erupted. Protests broke out across the country, fueled by economic desperation and rage at a regime that had brought them nothing but war and poverty. The United States encouraged the uprising. Trump threatened intervention if security forces killed protesters. The regime's response was horrifying. On January 8, 2026, security forces unleashed a brutal crackdown. According to officials within Iran's own Ministry of Health, at least 30,000 people were killed. 30,000. It was one of the deadliest crackdowns on civilian protests in modern history. In the weeks that followed, the United States began its largest military buildup in the Middle East since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. Carrier groups, fighter squadrons, bombers, an armada was forming. Everyone knew what was coming. The only question was when. The answer came at dawn on February 28th. Operation Epic Fury began with nearly 900 strikes in 12 hours. American and Israeli forces hit missile sites, air defenses, military bases, and command centers across Iran. But the most consequential strike was the one that killed Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. According to officials, the timing of the attack was specifically tied to intelligence on Khamenei's location before he could go into hiding. He was killed in the first wave, along with dozens of other top Iranian officials. The regime's head had been cut off, but the strikes also killed civilians. A missile struck a girls' school adjacent to a naval base in the town of Minab, near Bandar Abbas. About 170 people died. It would become one of the defining images of the war. Iran's response was immediate and widespread. Retaliatory missiles and drones rained down on American bases across the Middle East, hitting targets in Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, Iraq, Oman, and Jordan. Dubai International Airport, one of the busiest in the world, was damaged by drone strikes and forced to halt all flights. Hezbollah, despite its earlier ceasefire with Israel, launched missiles and drones into Israel from Lebanon. A drone even struck a British airbase in Cyprus. Israel responded with massive airstrikes on southern Beirut and issued sweeping evacuation orders across southern Lebanon, displacing over 1 million people. As of today, this war is still unfolding. Iran has appointed Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of the slain supreme leader, as the new leader, despite American objections. Israel has launched a ground invasion of southern Lebanon. Iranian attacks on shipping in the Strait of Hormuz have disrupted 20% of the world's oil supply, sending prices soaring globally. More than 2,000 people are dead. Hundreds of thousands are displaced. Flights across the entire Middle East remain disrupted, and Trump has sent contradictory signals about what America actually wants. One day, he urged Iranians to overthrow their government. The next, he suggested he'd accept the regime staying in power if it cooperated, similar to what happened with Maduro in Venezuela. Iran's strategy, according to analysts, is horizontal escalation. Widen the conflict, make it expensive, target oil infrastructure and commercial hubs until the cost of war becomes unbearable. It's the same playbook that's been used against superpowers before. Whether it works this time depends on how much pain the United States and Israel are willing to absorb, and how much more pain Iran can endure. The story of the Iran war is ultimately a story about what happens when decades of hostility, failed diplomacy, and shifting power dynamics finally reach their breaking point. Every off-ramp was missed. Every red line was crossed. And now the Middle East is living with the consequences. Thanks for watching. If this helped you understand how we got here, please consider subscribing. We cover stories like this every week, and it's viewers like you that make it possible.